It's all coming together right here now. It's all coming.
Bruce Bauman with We Are Change Colorado, WACC TV on YouTube. I'm with Jon Elinoff, documentary filmmaker, investigative journalist, and he's the one that broke open the Pat Sullivan story. And that's why we're here today. We're outside the Arapahoe County Courthouse, and Patrick Sullivan is the former Sheriff of the Year. He had the jail here named after him. It was the Patrick Sullivan Detention Center, and Jonathan actually sent him to his own jail that was named after him. It was quite the legendary move for you. It's quite, the courageous move for you, putting someone in prison or jail, I guess, for crimes of soliciting meth for sex. And there was tons of different allegations that didn't really get investigated. We can go into that, but what's your reaction to Pat Sullivan's sentencing today? He was sentenced to 15 months back at the Department of Justice. What do you think about that sentence?
I think that honestly, it's a catch-22. I think that there was some justice done today. He is going to prison, so that is a win for the victims he's hurt. At least something's being done to him now. However, I still feel like it should have been longer sentence, and like you pointed out earlier, there are other allegations, there are other charges that could have been brought up, but working closely with some of the people on the investigation, working with even law enforcement on this, and even gathering the evidence that was used in this case, and providing even the confidential informants for the sting, I'm in a unique position between respecting the confidentiality here and telling you that building a solid case against the other charges was the most difficult part. There were dead bodies found. There were people who were last seen with Sullivan who were found dead. And unfortunately, because the bodies were so decomposing and because they didn't have a murder weapon or something like that, there was no sign of struggle. There was date rape drug in their bodies. So, in terms of being able to charge Sullivan with homicide, it would have been next to impossible.
There wasn't enough. We'll go into that a little bit more. What went into making this bust happen? I know you were working directly with these law enforcement officers and making sure that justice was brought at hand, and it happened. You can check out the bust video. I'll put it in the links. But the bust video is pretty crazy. I mean, he is just openly watching pornography and is ready to smoke some meth with this guy that he's about to have sex with, and they come busting in with tear gas and assault rifles. What went into making that happen?
The confidential informant used in that video, I believe, I'm not allowed to say his name, because he is a CI, but I had to drive down to Pueblo to find him after searching for him for 3 weeks. And believe it or not, he was staying at the time at another sheriff's house down in Pueblo, another very high-ranking sheriff's house, and there was sex and drugs being used at that house as well. And it was a full interview that I did with him. Some of that was released online, where he had no hesitation to say, yeah, this is a lot more people than Pat Sullivan. This is a small group of men that go to bathhouses, this, that, and the other. And I was startled by the information at first, but felt compelled to further investigate it. So when I went to police and I found out that they couldn't get the sting done a year prior because they didn't have cooperation from an informant who later turned up dead, I said, well, I can help you get people together to get this guy, and it's your job now to get him arrested. And I put people on the spot, and for about a solid week they were threatening me. They were saying, oh, well, there's this and the other. And I said, well, when I went into the FBI's office, I had a hidden camera on me. I have all of you guys and your identities. I know some of you are undercover officers with narcotics, and the last thing you would want is press attention related to your inability to follow up on a report. And within 3 days, they busted Sullivan, and I handed them the confidential informant to do that. And so that's how this all finally got done. Because for a solid year, as we heard, the sheriff's office changed their story 4 times, was when they heard about it. At first, they didn't know anything, and then, oh, well, we heard from Mr. Elinoff. Oh, no, actually, it was a month prior with a phone call. Oh, no, it was a year prior. Truth is, if they could have done something and they knew for a year, they would have done it. It wasn't until I got involved that they did something. Now, I'm not taking responsibility for the bust. I'm saying, why was there such an inability to follow up on calls and look into these deaths?
And the point being that they stopped there. They got their bust, they got him with the meth, they hit him with the prostitution charge, and they stopped there. They weren't going to look into Uncle Pat, into the deep depths of really what he had been doing, what he'd done, how he's put people in prison, free Donnie Andrews.
For sure that,
yeah, exactly.
You can make that statement.
Exactly. This guy, it's as dirty as it gets. Can you talk a little bit about uncovering some possible links from the early 90s. Now, I'm from Omaha, and the Conspiracy of Silence documentary online is something that is scary and dirty, and you know, people are so scared of it they won't even talk about it. They say you get killed for talking about this stuff. Can you make any comments on some of the connections that you started to link up, but you know, you just can't really peg it 100%?
I spoke to Nick, and he wrote the Franklin scandal, and you know, he did call me at the time of Sullivan investigation. He told me to read a specific page in the Franklin scandal book, and it talked about a man from Colorado who used to wear a badge, who went out to Nebraska, and he picked up 3 of the young boys, and they never found those 3 boys again. And Nick had confirmed with me independently over the phone when I said, well, is that brass man, badge man, where we called him? I said, is that Sullivan? And he said, yes. And I said, well, what evidence can you give me to confirm that? And he says, I can't give you anything because no one's going to cooperate, which is very similar to what I was experiencing talking to victims. And it was the same with, I can't mention this person's name, but it was, his first name's Joshua. I can't say his last name. He was one of the victims who had received HIV from Sullivan. And it was the same thing. When we tried to get him to cooperate, he was scared, he was paranoid, he felt Sullivan had ties with drug lords and gang members, and that these people would come after him. And that was, again, this is another area that prosecution could have looked at, is what ties Sullivan had with the drugs. We know from the bust that the person he picked up drugs from, and quote, was a very large amount of drugs. I can assure you it was enough to put that man away for life, and they didn't put him away for life. So there are things related to organized crime here that weren't looked into, but again, that's an area separate from Sullivan. So staying on Sullivan, what I know is, yes, there may have been connections to Nebraska. Now, Sean Moss, whose body was found floating in the Platte River, he's from Nebraska. He's from Omaha. He's an ex-gay porn star. He was hired as a security guard at Cherry Creek Schools. And while working at Cherry Creek School District, he was caught distributing meth and recruiting kids for private parties. The school officials chose to keep the story quiet. They fired Sean Moss. They looked at Sullivan for having personally hired Sean Moss, and all of a sudden Sullivan abruptly leaves his position as head of security for the schools. Now, this is the job he had after sheriff, which was a very prestigious job. As we know, Cherry Creek School District is Cherry Hills and all those, you know, rich kid areas. I tease that term, but you know, it's a very prestigious school. So what I would say to all those parents of kids at Cherry Creek Schools is, this man put your children at risk. Not only did he put your children at risk, he brought meth into the schools. Now, they probably told Sullivan to leave. I can't prove that. The school's official statement is he abruptly left his position. I find that hard to believe. I find it more reasonable to believe that he was asked to leave, and that was a nice way of firing him, because that's not an uncommon way to do that. However, if that's the case, then the school officials could be criminally culpable or negligent here for not having acted legally then. And of course, as we know later, Sean Moss's body was found floating in the Platte River. Now, that gives motive. So when they say, well, we didn't have a strong enough case against Sullivan for the Sean Moss death, we can't say homicide because it's unsolved. Okay, it's an unsolved death. There's motive. Okay, there's a lot of motive. There's date rape drug in his body. And then there's the connections to the other alleged deaths. And this is what I'm
patterns, yeah.
Yeah, the history of pattern. And that's what I wanted to see prosecution do. And working closely with investigators, like I said earlier, what I found was they felt they couldn't build a strong enough case. But I will tell you, and I can assure you if you just look this up online, I've seen countless homicide suspected cases, okay, where someone's suspected of killing somebody, where they have almost nothing to go on, and they try them. They try him and they put him in court. They can't find a murder weapon, nothing. So the prosecution's office, which didn't give you a statement earlier,
report was just and appropriate. Thank you. That was easy. Thank you, sir. Thanks,
any words on if they're going to continue looking into the other allegations for Sullivan?
Take care now.
Anything about that, sir? The murders, child molesting, any of that?
You know, Mr. Spiro, who I know, I think he should answer these questions. I think they had enough information to press charges against Sullivan for homicide, and they didn't. So, again, is this a conspiracy theory?
Well,
I don't know.
This is just a reflection. This is a reflection of how our justice system works. That's exactly what I told the AP lady, whether or not they put that quote in there. But we know this. This is how people with money and people with power are handled. You know, they're given a little, oh, yeah, serve 17 days for meth for sex. 17 days. And then he's back out on the streets. He's going out to eat. He's hanging out with the same people. He's the same habits. He's openly admitting to traveling out of probation. He fails to take 31 drug tests. He fails the ones he does take for meth. And now they're hitting him with 15 months And, you know, well, you can say that's a victory, but I think this guy's 71 years old. If they would have hit him with a 20-year sentence, I think maybe that would have been a victory. But any last kind of connections you want to go into? I know there's lots of speculation. Let's call it what it is. It's all speculation. But Pat Sullivan firing the shots in Columbine. Some people want to talk about that. Any words on that?
I did see the statement from the deputy about that. You know, these are things that at the height of the investigation, when it was all over the press, you know, I was told and I was asked to sign a confidentiality with people that I was working with at the time to stop looking any further into the Sullivan case because it would be interfering with police work. And they threatened arresting me, they threatened me with all kinds of stuff. So I stopped at that point, although I continued to receive emails and phone calls from people who felt anything that they knew about the guy, they contacted me on. I didn't follow up on this stuff, so I am aware of these allegations. I am familiar with it. I didn't personally follow up on it, so I can't confirm or deny it. But there is one that I can, which was after the arrest, within a week or two, and I have to double check on the times. There were people saying, you know, there's no evidence that Mr. Sullivan had any sex with a minor. And I can assure you that a person who was a very dangerous character, who was representative of a group here in town related to drug running, very, very dangerous group of people. These people had some kind of figure who chose to remain anonymous, who did hand me a tape, and that was, you know, in the news. Julie Hayden at Fox 9 News, or at Fox News, she, you know, documented me handing the tape off to investigators. And when Martino and I watched the tape, it appeared to show what we believed was Sullivan, but we couldn't positively identify if it was for sure him, because it's a tape. It's not like you can verify. That's not enough, especially if it's old and it's somewhat, you know, blurry, the wrong angles, things like that. But in this tape,
it was enough to make you question it.
It was a tape that, yeah, it appears to be Sullivan. I would say an 80 to 90% chance. Can't verify 100%. And the young boy looks maybe 8 or 9 years old. He's bound, his hands behind his back. There's a cloth over his head. And the person who we believe to be Sullivan rapes him. It's a very, very graphic video. And the video cuts out before, there's obviously more tape, but it cuts out, and we were told by the people who gave it to us that it's a snuff film. Yeah. So we did not see the part that would have, you know, shown the death. And when I mentioned this to Nick, who wrote the Franklin scandal, and I said, you know, this video looks very old, he says this is probably from that time period, which means that these people...
The early 90s Franklin cover-up scandal that happened in Omaha, Nebraska, with the link to Boys Town kids that were all the way up to the White House. This was during George H.W. Bush. Dirty, 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 dirty guys.
Well, and I don't talk much about the Franklin scandal, but yeah, I mean, people can look it up and they can learn about it, and I'm sure you guys will talk a lot about it, and it's a very disturbing story. But again, what I can say is that this video, whoever had this video, okay, because I didn't record this video was clearly
blackmail.
Whoever had this video owned that sheriff. That sheriff was in their pocket. If he's scared to, you know, let that come out, which he probably was. So it told me that there's another element here that may or may not be the reasons why he was given such a leniency, is because if they're doing that to him, what are they doing to the prosecutions and the governor and all these other people in town? And I don't know this, again, this is
speculation.
But that's my response, and that's why I got so freaked out, shut down my websites, and walked away from everything, because I got this feeling like there is a hidden element here, way darker than Sullivan, and it's very powerful.
Talk a little bit about that. Is the movie on the shelf? Is it going to come out? I know your second film, Core of Corruption, you know, it kind of got put on the shelf for a little bit, and we didn't really hear much from Jonathan. I can understand. I think we all can understand what he went through, and I think we all need to look at Jonathan as a huge inspiration, and you know, I admire your courage. And I guess before we even talk about the movie, let's talk about what words do you have to inspire others to stand up to corruption, even if it is at the highest levels of their local areas, to have the courage and to have the strength to stand up to these very, very dangerous people that need to protect themselves, and that will protect themselves at all costs. You did that. You stood up to them.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words. Yeah, I would say, and I encourage everyone to stand up against, you know,
an injustice to one is an injustice to all.
Exactly. And what I would say, what my words of advice would be is stick to a solid legal argument. Don't break the law in your attempt to gather information. Learn about it, study about it, talk to lawyers, become a paralegal, whatever it would take to learn the process to build a case. Because that's more than anything I took from this experience, is how one goes about such a thing, so that you can be taken credible, so that the police will work with you, which, if anything, this case does show, with regardless of his sentence, they did act on him. And I'm not a cop or anything, so you know, I wish I could.
We have power in our hands right here, and power through video cameras like this, and mics like this.
Done more, but you know, but this is a sign that you can do it. So this should be a message of, you know, if you know of injustice going on, do something about it,
and don't just stand idly and watch it, because then you're complicit. So what's on the next for you with the movie, with anything? What's new with you?
My server was hacked at the time of Sullivan. I lost everything that I was working on at the time.
Jeez.
I had made that public, but yeah, it was a very, very difficult thing to go through. I had lost 5 of the hard drives in my raid, and I basically lost all my information. I lost everything that I had edited, everything. But I will tell you, everything that was in the film can be found online. I didn't find anything unique to me in the sense that, you know, I found the thing that everyone's been looking for.
Smoking gun that we already know, with Building 7, we know 9/11, but people are still trying to pin names, still trying to go deeper, find justice for those victims. So it's probably just kind of Gandhi for there. And what's next for you? I know you're kind of changing the world through it yourself, and that's kind of what We Are Change is going through the transformation. We're going through the transformation of letting events like these fearful, scary, dark events like this, we're letting those, you know, we're giving those our awareness, but we're not going to dwell on those. We're going to shine light, and then we're going to focus on solutions, which we're doing the non-GMO potlucks every Monday at our meetings, 8646 West Colfax in Lakewood. But what's up with you, though, lately? Just kind of been taking care of yourself and changing from within.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I went through about a solid year of depression, some PTSD from the experience, knowing some of the people that died, and knowing some of the victims that have HIV that are still not getting the medical treatment they need. You know, waking up in cold sweats, remembering the guns pulled on me, remembering the threats against my life. It took a while to come back, and then in the second year I was just kind of starting to work out, focus on my diet, and now it's been enough time. And you know, that's the truth, is that the real change that I can cause, because you can't change everything, you got to accept things you can't change and gain the wisdom to know the things you can. And the things you can change are your own personal health, what you put in your body, what thoughts you let come into your mind, meditation, things like that. So I've been focusing more on that, and that, I think, is the first step to real change. And if more people were to do that, that would be a start to things, you know, believing in yourself, believing you can do things, you know, and moving those on to, you know, creativity and getting your goals, you know, in touch with the actions and actually accomplishing things. And that's what I tell everyone now when they say, what are you up to? I say that.
No, real change, changing the world. And we really appreciate everything you've done, the movie and the investigation and everything, and being here today and speaking to people. That's how we do it. Just no fear at all, just shining light on the darkest of the dark here today at the Arapahoe County Justice Center. It's been a dirty day. I really felt gross about that. I stood up and I said, Sullivan, child molesters like you deserve way more than 15 months. The guy's 71. He shouldn't even see the light of day one more time. But he's gonna, and he's a menace to society. And so the day he gets out, maybe we'll be back here waving to him and just telling him that we know that he's out there on the streets again, because he will be, and he's already proven that he won't stop doing what he's doing. So thanks for watching this, and make sure to subscribe.